Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're going to be diving deep into René Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. This book, it was originally published in 1641, and it's really a cornerstone of Western thought. And you know what's so fascinating about it is that Descartes sets out to prove the existence of God and the soul's immortality, not by leaning on faith, but by using the power of reason alone.
Yeah, it was a really radical idea at the time, especially considering the backdrop of the scientific revolution. All these traditional beliefs were being challenged, and Descartes wanted to establish like a solid foundation for knowledge in a world that suddenly felt uncertain.
So it's almost like he's building a philosophical fortress brick by brick, using reason as his mortar.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And the meditations themselves are structured like a step-by-step journey. He takes us through his own process of doubt and discovery, leading us through some really profound questions.
So before we get lost in the twists and turns of his arguments, can you give us a roadmap? What are the big themes we'll encounter in this deep dive?
Definitely. Throughout the meditations, Descartes wrestles with the nature of knowledge. How can we be certain of anything? He explores the existence of God and the relationship between our mind and body. Are they separate entities or two sides of the same coin? And he tackles the problem of error, grappling with why we make mistakes despite God's supposed perfection.
It sounds like a philosophical roller coaster ride. Let's buckle up and start with his method of radical doubt. It's pretty intense, right?
Intense is an understatement. Descartes doesn't hold back. He meticulously dismantles his beliefs, demonstrating how our senses can deceive us. He uses vivid examples like optical illusions and the feeling of sitting by a fire when you might actually be dreaming. He even throws in the possibility of an evil genius who could be manipulating our perception of reality.
Okay, an evil genius might seem a bit out there, but I think the point is that we shouldn't blindly trust everything we perceive, right?
Exactly. Descartes is urging us to question even our most basic assumptions. He's basically saying, don't take anything for granted. Let's start from scratch and see what we can truly know with absolute certainty.
So how does he climb out of this pit of doubt? I mean, if we can question everything, how do we find any solid ground?
That's where his famous cogito ergo sum comes in. I think, therefore I am. Descartes realizes that even in a state of radical doubt, one undeniable truth remains. The act of doubting itself proves that there's a thinking mind doing the doubting.
So even if everything else is an illusion, the very fact that I'm thinking, questioning, experiencing means I must exist.
Precisely. This cogito becomes his bedrock, his unassailable truth. And it's not just some abstract philosophical concept. It has practical implications for us even today.
How so?
Well, think about it. The cogito emphasizes the power of our own minds. It suggests that we have a responsibility to engage in critical thinking, to examine our beliefs, and to not blindly accept what we're told. It's an empowering idea that resonates deeply in our information-saturated world.
Yeah, it's like he's giving us a tool for navigating a world overflowing with information, opinions, and potential deceptions. But once he establishes his own existence, doesn't he then turn his attention outward towards God? You're right. Having found certainty in his own thinking self, Descartes shifts gears to prove the existence of God. But remember, he's committed to using reason, not faith. So he lays out this fascinating argument based on the idea of perfection. He suggests that the very concept of a perfect, infinite being God couldn't have originated from our imperfect, finite minds.
It's like saying that a puddle can't conceive of an ocean.
Exactly. The cause must be at least as great as its effect. So for Descartes, the idea of God must have been planted within us by God itself.
This is where his concept of clear and distinct perception really comes into play, right? He argues that whatever we can perceive clearly and distinctly must be true because God being perfect wouldn't deceive us. That's a crucial point. For Descartes, clear and distinct perception becomes the gold standard for true knowledge. He sees it as a kind of internal compass guiding us towards truth. And he applies this principle not only to the existence of God, but also to our understanding of the material world. And this is where that famous wax example comes in. Remember how he is questioning the reliability of our senses earlier? Well, in Meditation 2, he uses this piece of melting wax to illustrate how our senses can be deceiving and why pure understanding is more reliable.
Ah, yes. It's fascinating how he describes the wax changing shape, texture, even smell as it melts. But ultimately, we still know it's the same piece of wax.
It's a simple example, but it has these profound implications. Descartes is showing that while our senses provide us with this raw data, it's our mind that makes sense of it, that grasps the underlying essence of things.
So he's making a distinction between our senses, which can be fooled, and our intellect, which has the power to understand the true nature of reality.
Exactly, and he ties this back to his argument for God's existence. If we can clearly and distinctly perceive the idea of God, even though we've never experienced God with our senses, doesn't that suggest that this idea must come from a higher source?
It's like he's saying our reason, our ability to understand abstract concepts, is a kind of divine spark within us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And this leads us to one of the most challenging aspects of Descartes' philosophy, the mind-body problem. If our mind is so distinct from our physical senses, how do they interact? How can something immaterial like our thoughts influence something material like our body?
It's a mind-boggling question that still puzzles philosophers today. What's Descartes' take on it?
Well, he argues that the mind and body are distinct substances, but that they interact through the pineal gland, this small structure in the brain.
Okay, so he's acknowledging that there must be some point of connection, even if he can't fully explain how it works.
Right. And while his specific explanation involving the pineal gland might seem a bit outdated from like a modern scientific perspective, the core question he raises, the interplay between the mental and the physical, remains incredibly relevant. Think about modern debates on consciousness, artificial intelligence, even the placebo effect.
It's mind-blowing how Descartes, writing centuries ago, was already grappling with issues that are still at the forefront of science and philosophy today.
Yeah, it's a testament to his enduring influence. But he doesn't stop there. He goes on to tackle the problem of error. Why do we make mistakes if God is perfect and created us?
Yeah, that's a question many of us have probably pondered at some point. What's Descartes' explanation?
He attributes error to this mismatch between our will, which is infinite in its capacity to choose, and our intellect, which is finite in its understanding. We make mistakes when our will overreaches the bounds of our knowledge.
So it's not God's fault we mess up. It's our own flawed judgment.
Precisely. And this has implications for how we live our lives. Descartes suggests that we should be cautious in our judgments, recognizing the limits of our understanding. He advises us to cultivate intellectual humility and to carefully consider all sides of an issue before making decisions.
It's almost like he's giving us a recipe for wise decision-making.
Exactly. And while he might not have envisioned the complexities of the modern world, his advice is strikingly relevant in our age of information overload and rapid-fire decisions. He's reminding us to pause, to reflect, to question our assumptions before jumping to conclusions.
It's like a call for mindfulness in an age of distraction.
Absolutely. And speaking of distractions, Descartes also has some interesting things to say about the nature of material things and how our senses can sometimes mislead us.
Ah, yes. This ties back to his initial discussion of doubt and the importance of clear and distinct perception.
Exactly. He emphasizes that our senses are primarily designed to help us navigate the physical world and survive, not necessarily to give us a completely accurate representation of reality.
That's a fascinating perspective. Can you give us an example?
Think about the sensation of pain. It serves a vital purpose. It alerts us to danger and prompts us to protect ourselves. But sometimes we experience pain even when there's no actual physical threat, like in the case of phantom limb pain.
So our senses, while essential for survival, aren't always foolproof.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the importance of cultivating sound judgment, of not blindly trusting everything we perceive, and of using our reason to discern truth from illusion.
Descartes certainly packs a lot into these meditations. It's incredible how he weaves together these seemingly disparate ideas, the existence of God, the nature of the mind and body, the problem of error, into a cohesive philosophical tapestry.
He's painting this grand picture of reality, urging us to see the world through the lens of reason, and to embrace our role as thinking beings capable of understanding truth.
It's a truly remarkable work, but as we wrap up our deep dive into Descartes' meditations, I'm curious, how do his ideas hold up in today's world? Are they still relevant in the 21st century?
That's the million-dollar question, and I think it's one that each listener has to grapple with for themselves. On one hand, Descartes' emphasis on reason and critical thinking is perhaps more relevant than ever. In our age of information overload, we're constantly bombarded with claims and counterclaims. It's essential to be able to sift through it all, to discern truth from falsehood, to not just blindly accept what we're told.
He's almost like a patron saint of fact-checking. We need that critical mindset now more than ever. But on the other hand, some aspects of his philosophy have been challenged or reinterpreted over time, haven't they?
Absolutely. For example, his strict separation of mind and body has been a subject of much debate. Modern neuroscience and psychology suggests a much more complex interplay between our mental and physical states.
So it's not as clear-cut as Descartes might have thought.
It seems not. We're learning more and more about how our thoughts, emotions, and experiences are intertwined with our physical brain and body.
That makes me think about the whole field of artificial intelligence. If the mind is truly separate from the body, could we one day create a thinking machine that exists solely in the digital realm?
That's a fascinating question, and one that Descartes probably couldn't have even imagined. It highlights how his ideas continue to spark new questions and push the boundaries of our understanding.
And what about the role of faith? Descartes set out to prove the existence of God, using reason alone. But many people find comfort and meaning in faith and experiences that transcend pure logic.
That's an important point. Descartes wasn't trying to dismiss faith altogether. He was simply trying to establish a foundation for knowledge that didn't rely on it. And while his arguments might not convince everyone, they force us to think deeply about the relationship between reason and faith, and how we arrive at our beliefs about the world.
So while some specifics of his philosophy might be debated, his core message, the power of critical thinking, the importance of questioning assumptions, the search for truth that still resonates powerfully today.
Absolutely. Descartes' meditations remain a powerful reminder of our capacity for reason, for self-reflection, and for seeking a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
He might have been writing centuries ago, but his ideas still have the power to challenge, inspire, and ignite our intellectual curiosity. And that's what's so exciting about philosophy. It's a timeless conversation.
A conversation that invites us to engage with the big questions, to wrestle with uncertainty, and to continue the never-ending quest for knowledge.
Well said. To all our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring Descartes' meditations on your own. You can find links to the full text and other resources in the show notes. And as always, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.